The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
All right, it's part 2 of the BS Report. If you missed part 1, Mike Lombardi and we talked a lot of football, and then I let him talk about the Sixers after. That's like the little gift I give him at the end. Now, part 2, TV. We haven't had this guy on in a while, from HitFix.com and the author of the new book, When the Revolution Was Televised. Oh, crap, I probably got that title wrong. Alan Sepinwall, what's happening? Did I get it right?
It's good to be here. It's just the revolution was televised, no when.
The Revolution was televised, which I read because you sent it to me, and I started reading chapters, and it was fun, and I couldn't stop reading it.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, so you concentrated on 12 shows that you feel like kind of defined where we are right now as a country with television shows.
Yeah, basically starting around the time of The Sopranos and a little bit before that, but ranging all the way up through Mad Men and Breaking Bad, to sort of looking at 12 different shows that tell a different part of the story about how, like, TV drama made TV much more respectable and sort of put it on a level playing field with the movies.
And thank God somebody finally paid attention to Oz, the most underrated show in such a long time. I'm glad you were able to give it some dap. And
Well, you can't tell the story without talking about Oz. The Sopranos doesn't get made if Oz isn't there first.
Right. And Oz, I feel like culturally just kind of never made it. So it's weird how some of these shows or movies or whatever, like some of them endure, some of them don't. I was talking to somebody this weekend about how Borat was such like a phenomenon there for like a year and a half, and then it just went away. And nobody would ever like say a Borat line or make a joke about it. But yeah, Anchorman has just kind of endured, and it's always on TV, and people know what you're saying when you make an Anchorman joke. And Oz is one of those shows that just didn't endure, and maybe it was because of all the prison rape. That might have been one of the reasons.
Yeah, certainly Adebisi sort of taking Shabetto over the table in the prison commissary was not helping with that.
Yeah, maybe I could see that.
Well, I mean, that was a show that sort of it weirdly appealed to lots of different people because it had so many kinds of characters on the show. But at the same time, it's violent prison show with just brutal, nasty murder and rape in virtually every episode. So it was never going to be as mass appealing as even something like The Wire.
Oz took every line that we thought existed and crossed it, and then jumped much further than it, and then looked back and waved, and then like kept jumping. Just kept going. I mean, there was nothing like that on television in the late 90s. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I remember David Simon basically he says a quote in the book where he was ready to walk away from television because he didn't think it was for him and go back and write for the Washington Post. And then Tom Fontana showed him the Oz pilot, and he says, "Oh my God, someone's making this on television?
Right.
I can do something with that."
You know, I do feel like ER is a show that maybe doesn't get enough credit of maybe paving the ground for some of these cable shows too, because when the first season of ER was incredible. I mean, it really was. And it just had and maybe NYPD Blue too to a different degree, but both of those shows together, and you covered this in the book a little bit, both of those shows together kind of just pushed everything to another level, and then the cable shows took it from there, I feel like.
Yeah, no, it was definitely NYPD Blue was a real sort of big bridge from the shows of the 80s, and it started pushing TV in more of that direction, but it's still like, as much as I love that show, and that's basically how my career started, it was still a cop show, and there has to be sort of a case of the week, and it's got to be solved by the end, and you have to hold the audience's hand a little. ER held the audience's hand even less and just sort of was moving fast, and you're right, that first season is incredible, and I've rewatched a lot of that many, many times. But that was still, to a certain extent, it was still a network hospital show. It was just really well done and moved so fast and had George Clooney in it.
You know what's funny? Friends, flicking channels, Friends was on, and Clooney and Noah Wyle were on it. It was from the first season when they did that bizarre cross promotion.
Yeah. I don't think they were actually playing Ross and Carter. I think they were just two other doctors.
It was unclear. They were two doctors, but they weren't totally Ross and Carter, but it was kind of insinuated that they were. But they were in New York, and Rachel and Monica were lying about their identity because one was using the other's health insurance, and it was like, wow, George Clooney, I can't believe he hasn't gotten this destroyed from television yet. He hasn't had more than enough money to kill this.
If he was going to have something destroyed, it would either be his Facts of Life episodes or Return of the Killer Tomatoes. I think those would be higher on the list. But I always loved when NBC would do those crossover nights, and then Seinfeld would always ignore it. So suddenly there's a blackout, and then for half an hour New York is not blacked out, and then it is again.
Oh yeah. And that was the famous Jill Goodacre episode of Friends, when Chandler's in the ATM with Jill Goodacre. I will still defend the first season of Friends to the death. It's a really good show, that first season. Then it
absolutely was.
The wheels came off, but it's funny, we were talking about things that endure and things that don't. Isn't it interesting that I feel like Friends is on TV more than Seinfeld at this point? Like, if you're just flicking channels in the average night, you're much more likely to see a Friends episode. You notice that?
Anecdotally, I would say that's been my experience, yeah.
And the feeling is like, Seinfeld came way before Friends. It really didn't. Seinfeld didn't really hit until, I would say 92. It had been on for a couple years, but short episode runs, like maybe 4 episodes or 6 episodes or something. It was only like the famous contest episode was 1992. Friends launched in 1994. It was 2 years later. It's funny that Seinfeld seems so dated when you watch it now, and the outfits seem dated. Friends seems dated, but not totally dated. Like, I feel like my daughter could watch a Friends episode and not feel like it happened in another lifetime.
Well, I think also some of the things Seinfeld did, like the contest episode, I mean, in 1992, it's amazing that you're doing a whole episode about that subject and sort of without actually saying it. And in 2012, Two Broke Girls is just making those jokes overt. So
yeah, and that's one of the things I liked about your book, because you forget sometimes the shows that kind of pushed that line a little further or took the chances, and you just kind of think that where we are now, you just forget some of those people that paved the way. And the fact that the contest was absolutely insane when it went on television that night. It was like, what is happening? It was just, there'd never been a show like that. And now I think that would be, like, if Two Broke Girls did that, you wouldn't bat an eyelash.
That would be among the more mild episodes of Two Broke Girls at this point.
Right. Yeah, they'd have to throw in something racist and totally offensive. Let's talk about, just so I don't forget, and then we can come back to your book at the end. Actually, no, let's save this, because maybe some people hadn't watched last night's Homeland. We'll save Homeland for the end of this, because I really want to talk about last night's episode.
There's a lot to talk about, sure.
I'm upset. I'm upset about last night's episode. I think there's a reason they didn't send the screeners out to people like you and Greenwald. Let's talk about this Boardwalk Empire season, which everybody has just been gushing about. Can I jump into season 3 without seeing seasons 1 and 2?
I mean, you can. They sort of structure each season like it's its own thing. So Bobby Cannavale comes in, and he's the big villain this year. But there's a lot of stuff in terms of relationships between the characters and between Buscemi and Kelly MacDonald that you're not going to appreciate quite as much. Maybe the best character on the show is this guy Richard Harrow, played by Jack Houston, and there's sort of this long build-up to him in the first couple seasons where you see just sort of how creepy and scary and vulnerable and what a badass he is. And he spends most of the season not being a badass, and you don't appreciate that if you haven't seen the first 2.
So you're saying I need to watch everything then? That sucks.
I would say yeah. And I mean, I like Boardwalk Empire a lot, and I thought the way this season ended was really good. I don't know that it's ever going to be a great show, but it's one that, even more than The Sopranos, I mean, it's created by a former Sopranos writer, but this guy cares a little bit more about sort of telling a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end than David Chase ever did. So if you tune in and you watch all 12, you're going to feel like you got a satisfying resolution to everything by the end of the 12 each season.
Are you still watching Dexter? You are, right?
I came back to Dexter. I gave up on it last season. I was just so frustrated. And then they cast, Yvonne Strahovski from Chuck, who I have a weakness for. And so I figured, all right, I'll start watching again, and they sort of fixed the show. I was impressed. That doesn't usually happen. When a show goes bad, it doesn't usually come back from that.
Everyone is telling me to jump back into season 7. It's funny. I watched 1 and 2. I jumped out on 3. I came back for 4, which I still maintain is one of like the best 10 seasons in the history of television. The Lithgow Dexter season. It's just amazing. And I actually think you could just watch that season without ever watching another episode of the show. Jumped back out on 5. Didn't watch last year. And now everybody's saying to come back for 7. I might come back. I might just bang them out on one weekend.
Straight into 7. I mean, they do one of those long, previously on Dexter things that runs about 18 hours, and that'll fill you in on what you missed. This basically feels like the season that they should have done after season 2. I like the Lithgow season. I think Lithgow's great, but in terms of just dealing with who Dexter is and why he is this disturbing guy and why it's not always so awesome to root for him to kill everybody, they're really sort of grappling with that here, and it's been very good.
Are we sure Michael C. Hall's a good actor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
to be able to play David Fisher and then Dexter Morgan, that's range.
Yeah, sometimes that was one of my things where I wasn't crazy about Dexter, was I kind of felt sometimes like Dexter wasn't a very complicated character. I didn't feel like it was a performance.
Okay.
But I don't know. I might be wrong. So you're saying his 6 feet under pedigree means that we have to respect this Dexter performance more.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good performance in and of itself, but I'm saying if you're questioning whether he's a good actor, just look at the last thing he did and how different it was and how convincing he was at that, and now doing this.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's a bad actor. I just he gets put with some of the really good ones, and sometimes I wonder.
Yeah, I would always put him like at a half step below, Ham and Cranston, and I guess now Damian Lewis, but he's really good.
See,
there was a while I was watching just for him. So
Damian Lewis's Emmy was an absolute tragedy. I can't believe he won the Emmy. And
really?
This year, to me, it's no contest. Like I just don't think he's that good, and I think he's really been exposed this year, and especially in last night's episode, which we're going to get to.
I was not happy with him last night, and we could talk about that. I thought he's usually really, really great, and he's been great in a lot of things. He was great in Band of Brothers. He was great in Life, that NBC show that nobody watched, but I did. I think he's really good. I mean, I would have given it to Cranston or Ham, but I would always give things to Cranston or Ham. But I think he's tremendous. It wasn't an embarrassment in the way it sometimes is with the Emmys, where it's like, James Spader again, really?
Right. I just feel like Ham should have won one of these years.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think Ham's going to win at this point, and that's a real tragedy, because within the scheme of Emmys, it's a real tragedy, because that's a great iconic performance, and he should have some hardware for that besides the Golden Globe.
And I also think, people think that or he's like almost playing himself, or it's an easy role or whatever. But he's proven with some of the other stuff that he's done that he can do different things. And I think, Kyle
Chandler kind of screwed him there, because if ever he was going to win, it was going to be last season, because Cranston wasn't eligible and he had the suitcase episode, and instead they gave it to Coach. And I'm not sad that Coach won an Emmy, but at this point, it seems like the voters don't want to give it to him.
How did you feel about Kyle Chandler being an Argo?
At one point, Cranston calls him up, and it's like Walter White is on the phone with Coach, and that's pretty cool. And plus, he had an amusing haircut, so I was happy with it.
I think he should have at least just randomly in one scene had the Dylan High windbreaker on. Just never acknowledge. just keep it on. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird to see him on other shows. It's weird to see Connie Britton on Nashville. It's weird to see anybody from even what's her face, Adrienne Palicki, who's in the Red Dawn commercials. Like, I guess life moves on. And even last night on Walking Dead, Cuddy was one of the new Walking Dead people.
I think on Walking Dead now.
I'm fired up. I like Cuddy.
Yep.
It was a good one. All right, let's talk Homeland. And if people haven't watched it yet, what can I tell you? Fast forward to the end. So I thought I was traumatized by how bad last night's episode was, and I feel like there's no going back. I just feel like they ruined the show. I really do. Like, I don't know. It was such an enormous gamble, and it just didn't work, and it was so far-fetched. And I know everybody's been making the 24 comparisons, but it really did feel like something that would have happened on 24 during one of those bad 24 seasons. I just don't. First of all, how is Brody walking around the White House?
Yeah, it's the vice president's residence, but yeah, he's just walking around
vice president's
without anybody
residence.
watching him. There's no Secret Service agents following the VP from room to room, standing outside. None of that. And the CIA had Brody's phone tapped, and yet somehow they're unaware that like Nazir is calling him and Skyping with him and sending him video of Carrie being bound and gagged.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I have a higher estimation of technology or something, but it would seem like you shouldn't be able to do anything with your phone in the vice president's office that people wouldn't know about, right? Or the vice president's resident, whatever. Like, if he's sending texts, it should seem like we could find out, like, all right, who was on Brody's phone for the last 24 hours? Oh, it's a terrorist. Oh, he's mailing him a serial number. Like, how does he not get caught for this stuff?
Yeah, that's wacky. Why Carrie, when she actually finally gets the trucker's phone, doesn't immediately tell them, go save the vice president, even though by then it's too late. Again, they know that Nazir is in the wind. They've been following Brody all this time. They know that Brody is one of the few people Nazir is still connected to, and they're freaked out about Brody and want to kill him anyway. Why are they not following his every move at this point?
Right. And why don't they have anywhere he goes, they know exactly what he's doing, what he's talking about, who he's calling. You know, the moment Abu Nazir texts him, calls him, whatever, that should be it. They should be able to locate him. And also, like, what kind of terrorist is Abu Nazir? Like, he has no henchmen. He's torturing Claire Danes on his own.
Well, they arrested pretty much everybody else, so he's now doing it, and apparently he can time a whole, auto vehicular attack on Carrie by himself. He's that good.
And then Brody killing the vice president, and apparently had. So I guess we're supposed to believe that Brody's been playing us all along, and he's still on the Nazir side.
Maybe. I mean, that's the theory some people have. The other is just like he, A, is obsessed with Carrie and doesn't want her to die, and B, even though he's, quote-unquote good again, he still wants the vice president dead. He's always hated the vice president, so I can see him doing this and yet not being evil. But I didn't like the episode, and I didn't think Damian Lewis was very good in most of it, which was sort of the most frustrating part, because even when the show's been kind of dopey plot-wise this year, the acting has been so good that I usually haven't noticed, and I think last night that wasn't the case.
They did keep the Claire Danes crying streak alive. She's now 20 away from DiMaggio. I don't know if you noticed that, but she passed Paul Molitor on the rank. But yeah, she was able to bust one out when she was handcuffed or whatever was going on. But yeah, I'm really worried. And here's my deepest fear with the show. And in your book you covered this with Lost, and this was always the rumor on Lost, and it was funny to hear these guys finally confirm it once and for all. Like, they never had a plan beyond that first season, and they all of a sudden were like, oh God, we got to sketch this out now. And the key fact with Homeland is the fact that Brody was supposed to die in the last episode, right? Everything
Probably.
They had sketched
I don't know
out.
if that's how it ended in Israel or not.
I thought initially he was supposed to die. The bomb was supposed to go off in the vice president's office, and that's how the first season ended. That's what I read.
I've heard differing things on that. That may be the case, but I think that at a certain point I was okay with the finale, and I was glad to see Damian Lewis back. But at a certain point, they're sort of having to contort themselves to keep Brody in play like this, and if he's going to be part of the show for the third season, that's going to be a big problem.
Well, don't they shoot the episodes very, very close to when they air them? And
yeah, I think they're still in production in North Carolina right now.
Right. So what I heard is like the Brody Claire Danes thing went so well, the first part of that season, that they were like, oh my God, we can't kill this guy off. Like, he's the best character on the show. And then they kind of revised what they were thinking with the ending, and now then had and it actually seemed like they were going to pull it off the first few episodes, and kind of get me to believe that this completely insane Claire Danes was now able to be pulled back into the CIA operation, like no harm, no foul. Which is, when we're talking about the big stretches on the show, that's got to be right up there. The fact that they're letting her do anything.
And you'll note that they've never sort of come right out and said what exactly her arrangement is, whether she's working for the CIA or if it's just she gets to come in for this one thing, because it's like the more you think about it, the more problematic it becomes.
Does she get paid? Is she back? Does she have health benefits?
She's got to be able to pay for those meds somehow.
So let's say that this rest of the season is as bad as last night's episode seems to be indicating that we're headed that way, barring like a miraculous swerve. And I do think it's really interesting that they didn't send anybody to the screeners. Like, to me, that's almost like when they have the movies, when they just premiere them, but they won't let the critics see it. You know how they do that?
Yeah, but sometimes the TV networks do this because they don't want, because the vice president died last night, so they didn't want that to get out that the vice president was going to die, and I assume more people are going to die in the next two. So it could be that too. We'll see. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, even though I didn't like this episode.
That's a very big benefit of the doubt. And then The Walking Dead had a big twist last night too. A semi-twist.
Which one?
Well, psycho crazy governor dude, his zombie daughter.
Yeah.
And he ended up with the glass eye. And I don't know, the loser turncoat. I can't remember her name that he's dating.
Andrea
is just all in on the creepy, terrible acting governor. And I don't know. It's actually been. I think it's been the best of the 3 seasons. But I wasn't nuts about last night's episode as a cliffhanger.
I'm with you. This has been the strongest of the 3 seasons, the most consistent. I got a bigger problem with Michonne, the other new one that I do with the governor, because it's like they haven't bothered to give her a character. She just scowls and has a sword.
Isn't that her character though? Does she speak? Has she said a word yet?
She speaks now and then, but there's a scene where she's got the sword out, Andrea's got the gun out, Andrea's all upset, and why did you do this? And all she's got to say is, hey, they kidnapped and tortured your friends and we're going to execute them. Yeah. She doesn't even say that.
Yeah. That's the problem. I thought they've done a better job this year. First of all, they've done a better job of just letting me see zombies get killed.
Yep.
Just show me some zombies getting killed. When in doubt, just show another barrage of zombie murders.
And they're also showing them being better at killing the zombies, which is good. So they don't seem quite as idiotic as they did for parts of the first and second seasons.
Right.
If you're around in the zombie apocalypse this long, you have to be kind of good at that.
They killed off Rick's wife, which was really one of the great moves ever. I do worry sometimes. And I thought the Lost chapter in your book was really interesting. How cognizant they were of internet chatter and the way people felt about things. And we've talked about this in the podcast before. I personally think they shouldn't look at that stuff. If it's something where it's just people are just going absolutely crazy about how bad a character is or how bad a plot is, maybe you think about it. But I think once you start reacting to the populace, it's really dangerous. And
David Chase is sort of the classic example of that. And, if you hated The Sopranos finale, you might disagree, but David Chase was never making any show but the exact show he wanted to make with The Sopranos. And he read a lot, but I don't think he cared about anything he was reading. And he was just going to do his own thing. And, it was a better show as a result of that than if he was just sort of focus group testing, via Twitter.
Don't you think David Simon probably didn't give a crap either, right?
No, David Simon absolutely is making the show he wants to make, and he will sometimes respond to complaints about it, but he's not going to change a damn thing. And Treme is a good example of that, because he could have very easily, after the first season of Treme, turned that into The Wire 2, New Orleans Boogaloo or something, and he didn't do that. He just kept making the Treme that he wanted it to be.
In the Wire chapter, you talked about John C. Reilly was the choice for McNulty, which I literally had to put my iPad down and take a walk around wherever I was and try to just figure out what the hell I was thinking. I'm kind of glad it didn't work out, but it really would. Here's the thing: the John C. Reilly Wendell Pierce scenes would have been kind of amazing.
Those would have been really funny, but would you have bought him as this incredibly charming screw-up who sort of kept convincing everybody to go along with him and, kept having women throw themselves at him and all of that?
Here's the thing. I love McNulty. And I thought Dominic West was great at McNulty. So I'm glad that's how it worked out. I just don't know. I don't know if it would have been better or worse. It would have been, I think it would have been funnier. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. And, as he said in your book, West, just saying part of the magic of that show is that you could phase out characters in or out depending on the season and what they had to do. And I don't know. Who was the other actor that was rumored for it?
Ray Winstone is a British actor. So they went to him. Then when he turned them down, they went to Riley. Riley turned them down. And then West sent them a videotape audition, which was just him talking into thin air because his girlfriend was supposed to read the other part. And she'd sort of decided at the last minute she didn't want to do it. So he's just talking to thin air and sent it, and they just thought it was so goofy that they wanted him to come in.
And that was that. And then the other thing I learned in that chapter was David Simon was thinking about a 6th season with what was it, Puerto Rican immigrants?
Just Latino immigrants coming to Baltimore looking for work at a time when work is sort of leaving the cities.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. How would he have pulled that off? I wonder what would have been. I guess he would have just basically done what he did in season 4 and just created a whole bunch of new characters and
exactly, and
one
one of them would have somehow, because he was struggling with work, would have gotten caught up in the drug trade, I'm sure, and that's how he would have crossed the paths of Lester Freeman and those guys.
Now, he could still do that, right? Like season 6 of The Wire could still happen.
I suppose if he wanted to, he could go to HBO and say, sure, because that's a show that's much more popular now than it was at the time it aired, and would get a much bigger response if they were to do it. I mean, you would have to get rid of some people. You couldn't have McNulty or Lester anymore because they got written out, but you could do it with some of the characters. Like, are you ready for a show where Sidner is the hero?
When was the last Wire episode? 2007?
I think 2007. So 06, 07, I think 08 maybe was when it was.
It'd be pretty interesting that he just kind of, no series has ever just kind of picked up a few years later, but I feel like that's one of the only series that could do it. And
I mean, it's happened on occasion, mainly in British TV. It doesn't happen so much around here, but they could pull it off, certainly, if Simon ever wanted to do it. I don't get the sense that he does.
I agree with you that many more people watch it now than did in 06 and 07. Because just the last 5 years of Blu-rays and live streaming and on demand, it's so like right now the Wire's it's available on demand all the way through to through Christmas. Like you can watch it right now. You can bang out all 5 seasons, and in 07 it just wasn't that easy to catch up. So.
And it's a much better way to watch it, frankly, when you can watch a whole bunch at once. You sit down on a Saturday afternoon, you watch 5 episodes. You know who everybody is at that point.
I'm glad you brought this up because Breaking Bad is finally going to happen for me over the Christmas break.
It's about time, Bill.
I have them all. I got them all on Blu-ray. I'm ready.
Okay, good.
Ready, and I'm just going to plow through them because I have to. When does it come back?
It comes back in the summer. I don't know exactly when. Probably July or August.
I have to be ready for that because now I caught up on Game of Thrones. That was good. I catch up with Breaking Bad. I'm in the mix. Then what do I have? People are telling me Sons of Anarchy, but where do you stand on that? Is that a must?
Sometimes I really like it. Sometimes it's really frustrating. If you're going to watch an FX show, I think it may be time to let go of your whole height thing and just watch The Shield. If you can watch a show set in the forest, which you did with Game of Thrones, you can watch a show where the hero is 5'6". I think it can be done, Bill.
I watched the first 5 or 6 Shields. I liked it. It just, I actually really liked it. It's a little dated. It was a little dated.
Okay. Well, it's 10 years old now, so I can see that.
No, it's that first season. It's 12 years, right?
No, it was 02.
Oh yeah. Okay, you're right. Yeah, it's a little dated. I mean, TV really. I think those Sopranos episodes feel a little dated now.
I went back when I was working on the book. One of the best parts of it was I had an excuse to go back and watch old episodes of all these shows. And for the most part, I mean, certainly with technology and stuff, and you see the size of the cell phones, things like that, those things look really dated. Oz was the only one that really felt to me, and I love Oz, but it really felt to me like it was of a time and place because it was the first one of these shows, and so it was kind of self-conscious about, oh, look at what we're doing here and look at what we're doing here, and isn't this daring? And that was awesome in 1997 and all of that, and a lot of those performances still work. But I think the shows have aged better than they have any right to, given how much of the time and place they are.
I am actually okay with how The Sopranos ended now all these years later. I think
really? When did you make peace with it?
It's probably the most memorable ending to a show ever.
Yep.
It's actually like a JFK got shot type of moment for a TV viewer. Like, who doesn't remember where they watched the last Sopranos episode? I actually remember I watched it where I was sitting.
Where were you?
I was in the first house that we bought in the little TV room, staring at the cable box, wondering why it went out, right, as it looked like Tony was going to get shot. And I think he'll never admit this because he's a stubborn bastard, but his biggest mistake was not just keeping the little tiny HBO logo on the bottom of the screen so people knew he had faded to black. He went all black. Everything was black. So the reaction, he'll never admit this, but the reaction you don't want from the people watching a show that they had just invested the last 8 years of their life in is my cable went out, which was the reaction that everybody had. They thought their power went out or their cable went out. And that's a mistake. You did something wrong if that's a reaction. So, but if you kept the invisible HBO letters in the bottom right, we would have known.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, he basically just wanted to go all black and not even run credits, and eventually the unions wouldn't let him do that. But he had something very specific he wanted to do, and he's never going to explain exactly what it is, and we all have to sort of piece together for ourselves what it meant.
I think we know what happened.
See, are you one of those who thinks he's dead?
No, I think he set it up so you could think either, and he left it up to us. But I think he set it up, especially like in the one of the first episodes. I think it was the first one of the last season, talking about what you think about that last moment before you die, and then the way they set up. Who was the guy? Was it Silvio? Who did he kill?
He's on the boat with Bacala at Bacala's lake.
That's what it was. Yeah. Like, to me, it's like that's a huge clue, and also, I think he set it up so that you could either think, no, this is the way Tony's life is going to be now. Every time somebody walks by him, he's going to be jumpy and he's never going to have peace. Or this is what it's like when you get shot. It goes black before you know what happened. And that's probably why he wanted the credits to go black, because that fit into that theme.
Yeah, no, and I love that finale, although I will say the best ending of that period for me, and the one I sort of go back and rewatch over and over, is the one to the Shield, because that one is just an emotional train wreck. It really will mess you up whenever you actually get around to seeing it. It's even better, I would say, than the 6 Feet Under ending.
Really? 6 Feet Under ending was really good.
Yeah, and that's a show I didn't love, otherwise it might have been in the book, but that ending for 6 Feet Under is great.
I'm trying to think what are the other great endings?
I think the Lost finale is good. Friday Night Lights has 3 great endings.
Yeah, I stand by The Wire. I know people are a little down in the 5th season, especially as time's gone on, but I thought the last episode was fantastic.
Oh, God,
I loved it.
Bubbles walking up the steps is amazing.
And Marlo, walking on the street, going back to that. I just loved that last episode, and I thought it made up for a lot of the problems with that season. Friday Night Lights, it ended so many times I can't even remember how it actually ended. They went to Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, he goes to Philadelphia to get the homeless guy, or whatever the city was. I think it might have been Virginia, and he drives him back, and then he parks right outside the Baltimore city limits, and they get the montage where you see what's happening to everybody.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite new show this year?
This year, not so. I mean, if we're talking calendar year, I guess I would go Girls, which I really liked on HBO. But lately, there hasn't been a lot that's good that's new.
Nothing, huh?
No, I mean, I had hopes for Last Resort, but that's been kind of all over the place, and ABC canceled it, so it's just running out the string at this point.
It must have been a bleak year because AMC brought back The Killing. I think everyone's run out of ideas.
Well, that's so frustrating. The sad thing is apparently they're bringing it back because Hell on Wheels, which was no great shakes either, but was just kind of acceptable, like all the producers quit, and so they can't keep the show going at the moment, and they have a hole to fill in their schedule. So, yay, The Killing comes back.
Hey, more heavy sweaters, everybody. Who's up for some wooden acting and some heavy sweaters? I will not be watching season 3. I actually barely watched season 2. It was one of those shows I watched while I did emails, and it was just kind of on in the background.
And in that respect, I was the same way, and it was an improvement because I was not invested at all. I was just sort of like, okay, I'm going to watch it and see what happened and find out who done it, and that's it. Yeah. So it didn't anger me as much as the first season did.
Well, I'm going to tell you a show that I'm very excited about, Alan Sepinwall.
What's that, Bill?
This Kevin Bacon serial killer show. Holy mackerel. I am so in. I am all in. 100% in. I'm buying all the stock available.
Okay. It's about time Kevin Bacon did a show, and this seems like I haven't seen it yet, but it looks cool.
You know what America likes? Serial killers. They like trying to find them and catch them, and they like when they're on the loose, and it's just, there's never really been a show that tapped into that the right way. And if this guy,
they've tried sometimes, but this will be a high-profile one, and it's NBC's doing one too because they're doing their Hannibal Lecter show.
Right. I always thought Ted Bundy, who I always thought was the most fascinating of the serial killers because he actually was a relatively, on paper, normal guy who was also like this crazy serial killer. But when he escaped from he escaped from some prison somehow. They like jumped from the third floor. And then he just disappeared for like a week, and he was on the loose. And he went down to Florida. I think he might have even committed some more murders before they finally caught him. But it was like kind of a scary week for the nation, like not knowing where he was. And then Son of Sam, same thing. When that summer of '77, no TV show has ever kind of captured that dynamic. I'm not sure why.
I mean, shows have tried. It's just hard sometimes because, I mean, I guess Criminal Minds just does it every week with a different serial killer, and that show's been on for like 17 years now.
Dexter in season 4 with Lithgow, I guess, was a little like that, like trying to catch a serial killer. But I like the idea of. Hey, I also really like Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, who doesn't like Kevin Bacon?
Yeah, who doesn't like Kevin? Who's out on Kevin Bacon? Who's like, I don't want to watch Kevin Bacon's new show.
That's a funny career because he starts out. I mean, his big thing is Footloose, and so it's easy to make fun of him. And then all of a sudden, 10 years go by, and you're like, wait a minute, this Kevin Bacon's a really good actor.
Yeah, and he's I know the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but he's been good in a lot of different stuff. But I like the idea of him chasing a serial killer.
Few Good Men and saying, wow, this guy is really holding his own against a lot of people here.
Yeah. Sorkin, were you happy with that show?
I was not happy with that show. I mean, I think parts of it were okay, but most of it was just not good. It's like Sorkin has certain things that he's really good at and certain things that just drive you nuts, and it felt like The Newsroom was all the things that drive you nuts, including the fact that he's just so condescending towards women that yeah.
So I watched the first couple and then went to London for the Olympics for 4.5 weeks. Had 5 episodes of my DVR, and that's probably the densest show that anybody's ever put on television because it was an hour of dialogue with no breaks whatsoever. It was just like 5-minute dialogue scene, 5-minute dialogue scene. So the thought of catching up with 5 hours of I just couldn't do it. I was out. I don't know what happened.
The weird thing is the one sort of positive of the show is that Olivia Munn has turned out to also be surprisingly good actor.
Yeah, breakout star, right?
She was probably the best part of The Newsroom that first season.
I might jump back in on season 2 when it's once a week, but that to me that's it. Did I ever tell you my 45-minute theory?
No, go.
I think on cable, I don't think these shows have to be a half hour or an hour. I mean, to me, that The Newsroom is a show that could be 40 minutes.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And there's a bunch that are like that. It's just like, okay, well, we're going to fill out Shameless on Showtime, which is another one I really like, but usually feels at least 10 minutes too long every episode. Yeah. That should be 40, 45 minutes easy.
Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to use the full hour. They can run like little preview things or whatever. I mean, if you really think about it, like that could be a good way for the networks to take some chances and have a 40-minute show and then show a couple of short films after that. Or I don't think they have to adhere to the hour-by-hour strategy that networks do. But
yeah, although the weird thing is like last night's Homeland was pretty short, and there have been a couple of Boardwalk Empires that were short this year, and then suddenly you get people complaining like, why was that so short? I'm paying money. I want a full hour of content. It's like, no, just let it be the length it should be,
right,
so you don't get sick of it.
Totally agree. So how's your book doing? It's doing good, right? It's got good reception?
Yeah, no. The reviews have been really positive so far, and sort of I'm self-publishing, and yet it's gotten good attention in a lot of places. So I'm very pleased.
I'm excited that you took that chance and that you did it because I do think we are headed for this world where you can promote your own stuff a lot easier, and you don't need to deal with the book publishing companies, almost all of whom are incompetent. And it's fun to read on an iPad. I read your whole book on my iPad.
I was able to finish this thing in like late October and publish it before Thanksgiving. So,
right.
There's a couple things that are already out of date because, like I mentioned, Last Resort, and that's since been canceled. But for the most part, I was able to keep updating things up to the last possible minute before it went on sale, which was really, really nice.
Did you have help for it, or you did everything yourself?
I had a friend who edited it, who's a professional copy editor, and then I hired a formatting company so that it didn't look like I cut and pasted it from a Word document, and I hired a cover artist, but in terms of the writing, that was all me.
Right. So it was easier than maybe people think it would be.
Yeah, and you can probably do it even cheaper than I did. I was sort of just I was hung up on making it look like, quote unquote, a real book. But if you're just doing something for the Kindle, you can turn one of those things around like that.
But we should mention you can also get it on Amazon.
Yeah, there's a paperback and a Kindle version on Amazon. It's also for Nook and for iBooks and a couple of other e-readers.
Cool. All right. Congratulations. I really enjoyed it. And I actually like that it exists. I thought I thought it was smart.
I remember when you did a podcast with Chris Connolly years ago, you were sort of talking about what was the defining movie of the aughts.
Yep.
And you eventually concluded that it was The Sopranos, and sort of that started the wheels turning for me. And I'm like, okay, that's what the book will be.
Oh, that's cool. All right.
So I owe you for this, Bill. Thank you.
I owe you for all the podcasts you've given us. Alan Sepinwall, we will check you out on hitfix.com. We loved having you on Greatland. We ran an excerpt last week that people can check out if they want. Happy holidays. Good luck with the book.
Thank you very much.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.